My name is Randy McCharles. Currently, I am a full-time writer of crime and speculative fiction. I've got maybe 10 books out. I've won a number of awards, made a couple of bestsellers lists. Right now, I'm working on a Private Eye series, which is kind of loosely paying tribute to the Due South TV show where you had the very polite Mountie. So I've got a ex-cop who kind of quit because he was too nice, and now he's a private eye.
Hi, I'm John Hartness. I am the founder and publisher of Falstaff Books, an independent press based out of Charlotte, North Carolina. And more relevant to this discussion, I'm the author of multiple urban fantasy series, including The Black Knight Chronicles, Quincy Harker Demon Hunter, and Bubba the Monster Hunter. So I write everything from dark urban fantasy to kind of medium urban fantasy to horror comedy. And I'm also a cast member of the Authors and Dragons live play D&D podcast.
Hello, I'm Julie HINER, aka Demon Julie, aka Von Julie. I primarily run killersanddemons.com. If you come by, I'll force feed you a toxic concoction of ritualistic murder, 80s metal, and raw horror. So I primarily write dark crime and horror. I have a core series, which is a very dark crime series. Think like Silence of the Lambs, True Detective, Criminal Minds. But I also have some horror short stories published and venturing into bigger works in horror now.
Hi, I'm Lily Luchesi. I am the USA Today bestselling author of the Paranormal Detective series, which is Urban Fantasy Mysteries, Never Again, which is occult horror, and the Coven Series, which is YA fantasy with just a hint of mystery. I am releasing the H. Papillon Paranormal Mystery series, which is my first foray into paranormal and cozy at the same time. I also run Partners in Crime Book Services, co-run, where I do cover design and professional editing.
Hi, I'm NIKKI Nelson Hicks. I write a bunch of things, a lot of weird fiction, a lot of horror. I write the Jackie Shinheji series, which takes place in 1930s New Orleans. It has basically a lot of pulp noir, and I throw a lot of monsters and murder. Quite frankly, if there isn't a monster or murder by chapter 3, I'm bored. So I write a lot of steampunk. I've written some Sherlock Holmes. I pretty much write whatever you want me to write. I'm kind of a whore. So if you give me a contract, I'll write whatever you need.
You know, in looking at this genre in many aspects, I was keen to find many articles that decided that mystery and suspense are like the peanut butter and chocolate of the genre world, where like maybe they go together, maybe they don't. The idea is that the mystery is the puzzle, the suspense is the tension and what might happen. I'm curious from everybody here about how, because you all cross multiple genres, you guys all kind of blend together and, blend whatever you're writing into certain different aspects of the genre. And so I'm kind of curious from you, what's the more important element for you? Is it the suspense, the mystery? Does it matter? Is it just all about telling a great story? I mean, that seems to be the bottom line, right? So
the story comes first, and then of course the mystery is always great. And as for the suspense, that's just the kind of like just the spice, at the end of it all. But for me, that's what it is. I like the story. If you got a great story, you can take me anywhere.
Some of the things that I edit have a ton of suspense, but there isn't any mystery and they're very interesting to read as well. When it comes to my books, I like to have a book on it. I like to have a plot twist. Plot twists, I feel, are very important, especially if you're writing mystery, and you can have, a wider cast of who did it, why did they do it. But mystery doesn't always have to have suspense, which I think a lot of cozies have proved. But I think some mysteries should always have a hint of it, because you're wondering, especially if it's a murder mystery, will this person strike again? But they don't have to go together. But I think suspense can stand on its own a bit more than mystery can.
Without suspense, the stakes in a mystery are very low. Like you said, the idea in a whodunit of, well, maybe they'll do it again, that adds suspense, that elevates the stakes. If you need to solve the mystery for something good to happen to your protagonist, then there's suspense in, will you figure it out in time for the good thing? Will you solve the mystery in time to prevent the bad thing? I feel like the suspense helps hold, especially with a contemporary audience. There are certainly whodunits where the person is dead, we need to figure out who made the person be dead, and they're not going to make anybody else be dead. But today, our audiences are conditioned to expect your protagonist to be in some kind of danger or at risk of something, and that's what adds the suspense for me.
I think suspense helps, like, if you're going to do like a series, it's almost like a glue for a whole series of stories.
I do. Also, I talk about it as the dum-dum.
Yes, the dum-dum-dum.
Yeah, suspense is your Law and Order bell. It's your dum-dum. That's, you end your chapter on a Law and Order ding, so that people will keep reading. And you end your book on a Law and Order ding, so people will buy the next book. And suspense is, for us, suspense is that ding. In a visual medium, you can get away with a lot of other things. The ding can just be a change of venue. But for us, it's really a key to getting readers to continue on in the book and to continuing to get readers so that we can continue to eat. Exactly. And I have a cat and I'm fat. So that means there's at least 2 people who are very interested in me continuing to produce food.
I would say for me that I didn't intentionally do it, but definitely the mystery and the suspense are equal. Now, of course, there's so many subgenres in mystery, and I'm very dark crime, very psychological. So I have equal points of view of the what I call a bona fide serial killer, like the Ted Bundys and the detectives. So the reader knows who the killer is, but they're being taken through his or her psychological journey and the detective's psychological journey. So the suspense there for me is like, who's going to die, who's not going to die, who's going to lose their jobs, who's going to, be shunned by their family. Is this man or woman going to keep killing people and getting away with it? So I think it's really important, but I'm in a very specific subgenre where no matter what you read or watch, the suspense is extremely important for sure.
You're at the thriller end of the spectrum. Your suspense is going to be way more important than perhaps your mystery is. But if you're at the cozy end of the spectrum, the story is everything, and you can get away without any suspense if you really wanted to do that. So it actually kind of matters what subgenre you're into.
What I was looking at when I was planning the series was, I know what each book's plot is going to be. They're all going to be standalones. The suspense, where would that come from? And it hit me where I'm adding my suspense with Paige's mentors. You find out in book 1, they have a lot of secrets. And as each book unfolds, a huge part of it's going to be Paige uncovering those secrets and eventually realizing there's been another mystery under her nose, and the reader's going to get that. While they get their mystery, their suspense is coming from another angle.
Yeah, I did as close as I get to cozy, which was a book called Amazing Grace, which was a Southern Gothic paranormal mystery. And it had very low suspense. There was the undercurrent of would the killer strike again, but it wasn't a given, and we never felt like the protagonist was really in much danger until the end, where, look, things happen. Also, I made it through an entire book and I did not blow anything up, which is kind of a record.
Yeah, I tortured Jake through 6 stories in the Jake Ishchenheji series. I just tortured the hell out of him. And so, yeah, there's a lot of suspense because from each story you're seeing as you're learning as he's learning, because he's my poor, hapless, accidental detective who just kind of fell into this scheme. So, yeah, as for suspense for Jake, yeah, I think there's some suspense, but primarily because you're learning as he's learning, and it connects all the 6 stories together in the omnibuses. So, yeah. But I torture the hell out of him. I do terrible things to him. So,
The only thing we like better than torturing our characters is torturing our readers.
tell me about it.
I
It's
can
so
see you enjoying every moment of that, Nikki.
Oh, I do. Okay, so story time. Some guy pissed me off at work, and so I got to kill him in a story. And I killed him terribly. I used his neck like a Pez dispenser. I just killed him bad. So I went to work the next Monday, and my boss was apologizing to me for all the crap. I said, it's cool, man. I killed him. It's cool. He was like, it's cool. I killed him in a story. It's okay. But I felt it was cathartic. I got to kill this son of a bitch.
I had a concept for killing somebody in the story. Anyone who wanted to die sent me an email. One was drawn, and that was the character's name of the person who was tortured to death.
Yeah, I end up using it as Kickstarter backers for anthologies a lot of the time. There's a backer level that says Hartness will kill you, or you can be the bad guy.
On my Patreon, I had Keyboard Assassin and Keyboard Hero, and everybody wanted to be killed. The Keyboard Assassin, you tell me how you want me to kill you, and I kill you $25. And people want to be killed. It's weird.
The other interesting thing about Mysteries and Suspenses is that there's a lot of rules I'm finding, but
Rules are meant to be broken, especially by SNDs, and we don't really give a shit about that. But, but there is something to be said for pacing in a mystery. And I'm kind of curious how you all approach that. Is it something you're thinking about as you're writing? Is it something that you look at when you're editing? Where do you come into making sure that the pacing has that mystery edge or that suspense edge to it that you crave when you're reading as much as you're writing?
I'm always conscious of it, even as I'm doing the first draft. I'm conscious of am I having a high scene or a low scene? Am I having a pause? Are we having something really fast-paced here? Even as I do the first draft, I'm thinking about that. But then, of course, when I do the second draft, I'm double-checking all that. And I sometimes get concerned that a scene might be too short or too long just for the rhythm of the pacing. And I look at trying to adjust that a bit.
My first draft, I'm just getting everything out. And then I kind of carve and do the rhythm, almost the composing later, the second draft, even the third draft. That's because the first draft is just my vomit draft. I'm getting all the things out, and then in the editing and all that bits, that's why I can carve and sculpt and get the composition just the way it needs to be.
I guess I figure a chunk of it out as I'm building the outline, because I go chapter by chapter and just a sentence or two, so I know where the lulls are. But it's kind of instinctive at this point. 20-something books in, I kind of better know how to do this. So sometimes I'll punch things up on a revision, but usually, as far as writing my style is pretty pulpy, so writing a pulp style urban fantasy story, I kind of gotten that one figured, so I don't have to think about it too much while I'm doing it. And then if I miss a beat or something's just dragging, I'll punch it up. I'll kill somebody, blow something up.
Exactly. Kill someone. The choice of pulp is boom, 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 boom.
Yeah, the best thing to do when you are stuck is to just drop a murder bomb. When I was doing Paranormal Detective series, it evolved from 1 book to 3 books to 5 books to 8 books. So I didn't plan anything, completely pants the whole thing. And the worst thing about the pacing was if I felt, well, they're getting so far into the investigations to try and find this criminal, what do I do now? I'll drop another body. It's something that can always work, it can always fit, and it is a great little way to kind of escape a monotony. Especially if you do a lot of murders, you have to make sure they're creative. The same person, they can't always be dying by, gunshot wound to the head, or, werewolves took their heart out. If you're doing paranormal like me, you have to You have to go through and you have to see what's different, what's going to keep the reader reading, what's not going to make it say, well, that happened 2 books ago too, I'm bored now. So when it comes to pacing, you have to be very selective, and you have to make it fun. You have to sometimes just, like I said, drop a bomb on the reader. You know, if it's a murder, if it's a plot twist, or if the murder becomes a plot twist. It's a lot of fun writing something like this because you do have a little bit more creative freedom, despite the fact there are so many rules.
I'm like racking my brain to think about when I really think about pacing, but I think for me it's several stages. Like again, very specific to a subgenre, I always have about 4 or 5 murders, and that's important for the kind of serial killer that I'm depicting. So the murder scenes might be a little more involved and a little bit longer because I take the reader really deep into the images. But I guess I am quite conscious of not making the other scenes too long. Like if you're in a war room, I have very detailed investigations, and so I think I'm quite conscious of not making those scenes too long and too drawn out and dwelling on things that aren't going to go anywhere. So I think for me, at first, I may not be too aware of it, like some of you are saying, just get the draft out. But when I go back later, for sure, I think I'm really aware, especially of those scenes that could get very boring really fast, but you need to have them because you need to progress the investigation. I think for me too, the ending, like everything I watch and read that I'm aspiring to be like, their endings are where it really gets amped up and shit really goes down and it's really scary. So I often rewrite my endings several times until I feel like they really are, like I'm even clenching because I need it to be really, really scary if I'm trying to find those readers.
It's all good editing and good beta reading, but editing is always just the spine of really good writing anyway. You have to have a good editor who really gets you and helps you to polish the diamond that's in your story.
Yeah.
Exactly.
If you find an editor that you work well with, they're worth their weight in gold. Hell, they're worth my weight in gold, and that's a lot of gold. I've worked with the same editor on every Bubba and Harker book almost since the very beginning, and I mean, I just hired her. She's my associate publisher now, so I locked her up.
Yes. Chain them in the basement, keep them, feed them well, but if you find a good editor, man, don't let them go. Yeah.
I have a client who writes motorcycle suspense, and I've been her editor since book 1. And it's definitely something that, you know, if you're going to be working, especially with the same characters, to find an editor that gets you, but also who gets your characters and gets your writing style. Yeah, you can't just have someone who's going to, you know, say, well, this doesn't make sense. Why are they speaking like this? It's the individual character. It's a personality. And it's something that you do have to cultivate over a few jobs. You can't just settle with one editor. You do sometimes have to get samples from other people to make sure you're getting that right flow for your book, especially for mystery and suspense.
The other thing I think is really important in these stories is the protagonist and antagonist and defining each one, right? And and obviously with a mystery, you kind of want to vary who the antagonist might be, but then you might also do what's called, this is my favorite term in mysteries, red herring, and we can talk a little bit about red herrings as well with this, but really defining your protagonist, especially the person that's going to be leading us on this journey, is super, super important in these books, right?
And you got to say the antagonist believes it. It is the protagonist, as far as they're concerned. They're the hero in this. They just misunderstood. Yeah, I think the antagonist is probably even more important than the protagonist.
From a strictly fiscal standpoint, the protagonist is more important because you're probably going to kill or imprison the antagonist, and you want people to buy the next book. So,
people want to be the protagonist, unless they're psychopaths.
I just want them to buy the next book. Their problems, look, they can get their own medication, but because a lot of us are working in series, it allows us to do more of a slow build on the protagonist, where we do need to define the antagonist more quickly, especially if it's a whodunit or a case where you have to eliminate that antagonist at the end of the book. If you're going to have to kill them, you only have this many words to figure out what they're all about. If your character lives, then you can drop hints and explore them more deeply next time through.
Yeah, I understand that. I did a whole slow burn, 6 stories where I build up Jake Ishchenheji, who he is, what he's dealing with, and also his villains, who he does eventually fight and deal with. Pretty much, yeah, I see what you mean.
And another big thing that he's talking about with your villains and your protagonists, the type of protagonist that you have depends on what antagonist you have as well. Case in point, Paranormal Detectives had Angelica Cross, who is very fiery. She's very passionate. Her emotions are all right there. And most of her antagonists come from a personal place. Sometimes professional as well, but they all know her in a certain way. Or if they don't know her, then they're connected to her, 6 degrees of separation, but it's still something personal. Whereas Paige, who I'm writing now, she is a lot more like me, where she's a bit more technical. She's not as personal, she's not as friendly as when you first get to know her, but you do get to know her idiosyncrasies. So she's not connected to her antagonist. I'm able to write very broad antagonists, very different, because her connections, they go with her friends, her mentor, eventually her boyfriend, even her best friend's pets. She has a connection with them, but there is no connection to the antagonist. And creating the type of protagonist that you want is extremely important, to have them and the antagonist either completely opposite each other or to complement each other, so that the book does flow more evenly.
If I'm trying to write, like I'll use Hannibal, the Netflix series, as an example, because people tend to know it. The killer is as important as the detective, and the person reading or watching it wants to be inside both their heads. And the killer does live through many seasons. So in what I'm trying to write, I actually do that in my books. And just because he's the killer doesn't mean he's going to go away. Or even if he does get killed, he might still be, there could be remnants in other ways that come through into the detective's life and haunt him for other books in the series. So again, I'm just pulling you're all saying the same thing, that the protagonist is really important. I concur. I do just think it's really important to really know your subgenre, if those are the types of readers that you're looking for, and keep that in mind when you're developing that protagonist.
Also important to understand that the protagonist is not always the hero.
Something to think about in a series is you want a protagonist that the reader's going to want to live with over multiple books. So you have to have an interesting and appealing and original protagonist that the reader says, hey, it's 10 books, I want to read all 10. But each individual book is going to be set apart by who the villain is, who's the antagonist, what do they bring to the table confrontation-wise, because it's that relationship between your protagonist and your antagonist that's going to define each individual book.
Sometimes your protagonist is not going to be a nice person. Your protagonist might be a little bit of Hannibal, because as much good as Angelica Cross does, by book 4, the readers all kind of have to stop and realize, holy shit, she's not a good person. She's not exactly a hero type. No one's going to be building statues for her despite all the good that she has done. There is that little bit of evil in her. It's inherited evil. Her father is a huge part of why she is who she is, and why she enjoys torture so much, and why she enjoys leaving bodies all over the city. Her victims just happen to also be way more evil and are harming humans. So that's her excuse to get away with basically being a serial killer.
The other important element, the setting. So do you guys want to all just talk a little bit about your setting and what that means to your story?
Setting is huge. And so my books are set in the 80s. They're a fusion of 80s metal. There's a lot of dive bars. There's a lot of gross places. But then the murders, a lot of the bodies are found in beautiful parks right in the city. So, of course, I had to use my own hometown, and a lot of the parks we have here is inspiration for that setting. So I like the juxtaposition between the beautiful park right in the neighborhood and then finding the body there. And I love I love the use of places like grunge bars and basements, and that's where you go for a drink, and that's where the murder investigation takes you. So I think very visual, again, the stuff that I'm trying to write like or be like, it's extremely vivid, very visceral.
Well, my Jake Easton takes place in New Orleans, 1930s New Orleans. So I have a lot to play with. I've got a bayou, I've got swamps, and I've got New Orleans. So much history. I'm a huge research nerd, and I did so much research into the history of the different areas and stuff of New Orleans that I could pull into my story, as well as all the different legends and ghosts and monsters I could pull into. So that's what I did. I took it from the 1930s, and of course the racism and all the problems they have at that time in New Orleans, which of course my character Jake Easton runs into a Hungarian. He's considered a Dalmatian. He's not considered white. And he's just like, excusez-moi? I mean, what? Yeah, he's having considered white. He's having to deal with that.
When you have a story idea, you have to think about what characters do I need to include to best show that story. And setting is a character. You go, which setting is going to best show that story? For example, my fourth Peter Galloway novel is a murder in a bridal show. And so I'm going, where do I want to do that? So I decided to do it in Niagara Falls. Honeymoon capital. Lots of interesting things in that setting I can incorporate. But if I had made it Los Angeles, it would have been a totally different story. And so I look at what location is going to best set off the story for this book.
I'm pretty lazy and I hate research.
I love research.
I got my degree, so I'm done with that.
I never did, so that's why.
Well, there you go. You can have. I mean, if you want, I got half a graduate degree. You can add that to whatever you got, and we'll make a piece of paper. I've got Photoshop. It's fine.
It's fine.
But that's why all my books are contemporary, and the majority of the series are set in Charlotte, because I don't want to have to research, and I can get the freaking geography right without having to look anything up. If I want to figure out something, I just kind of go for a drive. In the last Quincy Harker book, I had a dive bar, and a fan friend of mine just commented in my Facebook group asking me which of the two dive music bars in Charlotte that bar is patterned after, and he nailed it. It's 100% the Milestone, which is sketch-ass punk bar here in town. So yeah, Trevor recognized that right off. He knew it was either that or the Double Door, which no longer exists, sadly.
I got two separate series in Chicago, and one is Paranormal Detectives, which is mostly set in the downtown area and the area surrounding that, because it's darker, it's more professional, it's more buttoned up, it's fast-paced, it's, murders hiding behind a nice smile and a fancy suit. And then you have the Paige Papillon series, which it's set a little closer to where I grew up, where it's the merge of Chicago, Norridge, River Grove, that type of little area, where you have these murders happening in families' backyards. You have these pretty little six flats and their gardens out front, and there's a dead body in the middle of them, or their magical pets are getting kidnapped right out of their homes. And it was very important for me to showcase, the same city for two entirely different places. That's why I love being from here, because it is so vast and you can do so many things and so many people belong. But it was interesting for me to see, Paige is going to different places, she's finding different things, and it's fitting her personality and her pace and her genre. Whereas if she were thrust into Angelica's part of Chicago, it would not work out well. None of it would. It wouldn't fit the story. It wouldn't be anything. So setting is such an important thing. And like Don, I like being able to, I know where I'm writing. I do like to do some research too, just to be sure. But, I know the gangways. I know everywhere they're going. And I want to give the readers that familiarity as well.
I generally tell newer writers that if somebody's not getting laid or shot every 10,000 words, you need to pick it up.